You think you know fear? You think you understand power? The year is 221 BCE. A 13-year-old boy becomes king of Qin. By 38, he's the first emperor of all China. Every victory brings new spoils. Every conquered kingdom hands over its most beautiful daughters. They enter his palace thinking they've won the ultimate prize luxury, power, proximity to the dragon throne. They have no idea they're walking into a death sentence. Welcome to the inner palace of Qin Shi Huang, where beauty is currency, survival is politics, and your first night might be your last. If you value documented ancient Chinese history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual. Using sources from the archaeological work of Zhang Weixing, Deputy Director of Archaeology at the Emperor Qin Shi Huang's Mausoleum Site Museum, published in 2014, and Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian from the 1st century BCE, these aren't textbook generalizations, but direct excavation reports from the actual tomb complex where we found the evidence. Now back to the information. The selection begins before dawn. Village headmen throughout the newly conquered territories receive their orders. Every unmarried woman between 13 and 25 must present herself for inspection. No exceptions, no deferrals. The criteria are specific: unblemished skin, elegant posture, the ability to read and write, and what the court officials call a moon-bright beauty, a face that glows even in darkness. 259 BCE, Handan. A merchant's daughter named Zhao Ji stands in the selection line. She doesn't know it yet, but her son will become the most feared man in China. The inspectors examine her teeth, her fingernails, the arch of her feet. They check for scars, birthmarks, any sign of previous childbirth. A perfect specimen gets marked with red silk ribbon. Imperfect ones disappear into the crowd. But Zhao Ji represents the old system. Under King Zhuangxiang, things were simpler. One official wife, a handful of concubines, traditional arrangements. When her son takes the throne as Qin Shi Huang in 246 BCE, everything changes. The inner palace becomes an empire of its own. The first emperor never names an empress. Historians debate why trauma from his mother's scandalous affairs, mistrust of women's political ambitions, or simple paranoia about sharing power. Instead, he creates a hierarchy of ranked concubines. Lady without impurity, lady of reverent gentleness, lady who pleases the spirit. Each title carries specific duties, specific privileges, and specific dangers. Selection becomes systematic. Every conquered state must provide its quota: 50 women from Yan, 40 from Zhao, 60 from Wei. They arrive in the capital of Xianyang in covered carriages, clutching small bundles of personal belongings they'll never see again. The first stop, the inspection chambers. These aren't romantic encounters. Court physicians examine each woman like livestock. They test for virginity, fertility, disease. They measure hip width for childbearing potential. They check vocal cords to ensure pleasant speaking voices. Women who pass receive new names, new identities, new silk robes and colors that match their assigned rank. The living quarters tell the whole story. Archaeological excavations at the mausoleum site have revealed the layout of the inner palace-long corridors lined with small chambers, each barely large enough for a bed and a small table. These weren't luxury apartments. They were holding cells with silk curtains. Daily life follows rigid protocol. Wake at the hour of the rabbit 5 a.m. by modern time. Ritual bathing in water scented with jasmine and chrysanthemum. Breakfast of rice porridge and preserved vegetables. Then hours of training calligraphy, poetry recitation, traditional dances, the art of conversation. Everything designed to please an emperor who might summon you at any moment. The summoning system creates permanent terror. Eunuch servants display wooden tablets bearing each concubine's name before the emperor after the evening meal. When he flips a tablet face down, that woman has been chosen for the night. She has exactly 2 hours to prepare bathing, perfuming, dressing in the designated silk robes. Then eunuchs carry her, wrapped naked in a thick blanket, through the palace corridors to the imperial chambers. Why naked? Security. No hidden weapons, no poison pins and elaborate hairstyles, no chance to harm the emperor during intimate moments. The blanket ensures modesty while maintaining complete vulnerability. Guards check every fold, every crease. The emperor's paranoia extends even to his bedroom. But here's what the concubines quickly learn: being chosen isn't always fortune. Sometimes it's a test. The emperor studies faces, watches for signs of ambition or deception. Women who seem too eager, too calculated, often disappear within days. Official records list them as sent to distant provinces or married to minor officials. The reality is darker. The emperor's sexual appetite follows patterns. Younger women, especially those from recently conquered territories, receive preference during winter months. The court astronomers claim this aligns with the yin and yang energies. More likely, it's psychological warfare, reminding defeated enemies that their daughters serve his pleasure. Pregnancy changes everything. A concubine who bears a son immediately rises in status, receives better quarters, personal servants, protection from court intrigues, but pregnancy also brings danger. Other concubines, desperate for their own advancement, resort to poisoning, accidental falls down steep stairs, mysterious illnesses that cause miscarriages. The emperor fathers numerous children, but succession remains his obsession. He refuses to name an heir, keeping his sons competing against each other for favor. This creates a deadly game where concubines become chess pieces in a larger political strategy. Mothers of potential heirs live in constant fear of assassination attempts from rival factions. Then comes the nightmare that haunts every woman in the inner palace. The emperor's death. 210 BCE. The first emperor dies while traveling in his eastern provinces. The news doesn't reach the capital immediately. Palace eunuchs and court officials have time to plan, to scheme, to make crucial decisions that will determine who lives and who dies. Enter Hu Hai, the second emperor. Sima Qian, writing in his records of the grand historian about a century later, preserves the exact words of the imperial decree. It would be inappropriate for the concubines of the late emperor who have no sons to be out free. The meaning is unmistakable. Every childless concubine must be buried with their dead master. The archaeological evidence confirms Sima Qian's account. Zhang Weixing's excavations between 2009 and 2014 uncovered 99 small burial pits within the mausoleum complex. 10 have been fully excavated. Each contains the remains of young women, aged roughly 15 to 25, based on bone analysis. The skeletons show signs of violent death, broken bones, skull fractures, bodies thrown into pits rather than carefully arranged in coffins. Some remains were found with precious jewelry, intact gold bracelets, pearl hair ornaments, jade rings. These weren't common servants. They were high-ranking concubines, women who had lived in luxury and privilege, now dumped into mass graves like refuse. The kill methods varied. Some skeletons show evidence of strangulation. Others suggest beheading clean cuts through cervical vertebrae. A few show signs of poisoning, though the exact toxins remain unknown after 2 millennia. The most disturbing finding, many bodies were dismembered after death, limbs separated and scattered throughout the burial chambers. If you value documented ancient Chinese history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Dr. Huanyang's bone excavation reports published in 2016 by National Geographic, and detailed archaeological surveys conducted by the Emperor Qin Shi Huang's Mausoleum Site Museum. These aren't general historical claims, but specific forensic evidence from identified burial sites. Now, back to the information, but the physical horror was preceded by psychological torture. Imagine receiving the death sentence while still living in luxury. Court officials inform each condemned concubine of her fate, then expect her to participate in preparation rituals, ceremonial baths, final meals, prayers to ancestors she'll soon join. The condemned women have days to contemplate their approaching deaths while maintaining perfect composure. Some resist. Historical fragments suggest several concubines attempted escape during the chaotic period after the emperor's death. Guards found women hiding in storage rooms, disguised as kitchen servants, even trying to scale the palace walls. All were captured. All suffered enhanced punishments, public executions instead of private poisoning. Bodies left exposed as warnings to others. The exact death toll remains unknown. Sima Qian describes it as extremely numerous. Modern estimates based on the excavated burial pits suggest at least 500 women died in the mass sacrifice. If all 99 pits contain similar numbers of remains, the total could exceed 1,000 victims. Consider the logistics. 500 to 1,000 women, all executed within a few days of the emperor's burial ceremony. This requires coordination, planning, systematic murder on an industrial scale. Court officials compiled lists, organized execution schedules, coordinated with burial workers to prepare the pits. The bureaucracy of mass murder. The methods became more sophisticated over time. Early victims show signs of struggle defensive wounds on hands and arms, evidence they fought their executioners. Later skeletons appear more peaceful, suggesting the use of drugs or toxins to ensure compliance. Court records mention farewell tea ceremonies, where condemned women consumed special preparations that rendered them unconscious before the final blow. The second emperor's justification was both practical and spiritual. Living concubines posed political threats. They might claim their sons deserved the throne, might ally with rival factions, might reveal state secrets to enemies. Better to eliminate all potential problems at once, but the spiritual aspect was equally important. Ancient Chinese beliefs held that powerful men needed servants in the afterlife. The emperor's tomb was designed as an eternal palace, complete with terracotta armies, bronze chariots, replicas of his earthly domain. Living concubines would provide intimate services in death, just as they had in life. The burial arrangements reflect this thinking. Concubines' remains were placed in chambers leading toward the emperor's central tomb, as if they were approaching his eternal bedchamber. Their jewelry and silk garments, now decayed, suggest they were buried in their finest clothing prepared for posthumous service. Some evidence suggests not all deaths occurred immediately. Zhang Weixing's team found remains showing signs of prolonged confinement, vitamin deficiencies, muscle atrophy, symptoms consistent with imprisonment in small spaces for weeks or months. These women may have been kept alive during the tomb's construction, then executed only when the emperor's burial ceremony was complete. The psychological impact on the palace survivor servants, guards, officials must have been devastating. They witnessed systematic murder of women they had known for years, then continued their daily routines as if nothing had happened. The second emperor's reign continued with new concubines, new selections, new women entering the same chambers where their predecessors had received death sentences. This wasn't the end of the practice. Chinese imperial history records similar mass sacrifices. During the Ming dynasty, Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang ordered 46 concubines buried with him in 1398. The practice continued sporadically until the Qing dynasty finally abolished it in 1673. Over 18 centuries after Qin Shi Huang's mass execution, archaeological work continues at the mausoleum site. Remote sensing technology has identified dozens of additional burial chambers that remain unexcavated. Each one potentially contains evidence of more victims. More stories of women who entered the emperor's palace seeking fortune and found only death. The physical evidence speaks across 2 millennia. Broken bones tell stories of violence. Scattered remains suggest hasty disposal. Precious jewelry indicates these weren't nameless peasants, but privileged women who had lived in luxury before their brutal end. Modern visitors to the Museum of Qin Terracotta Warriors and Horses can see some of these excavated remains, though the displays are carefully labeled and presented with appropriate historical context. The contrast is striking. Elaborate terracotta soldiers created to serve the emperor in death, and actual human bones of women who were forced to serve him. The emperor's tomb itself remains sealed. Ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis have confirmed Sima Qian's descriptions. High mercury levels suggest the famous rivers of mercury, mentioned in ancient texts. Advanced imaging reveals a complex underground palace that may still contain the emperor's remains, along with the treasures described in historical accounts. But even if archaeologists eventually open the central tomb, they'll never resurrect the women whose lives ended in those burial pits. Their names are lost. Their individual stories remain unknown. They exist now only as anonymous bones in museum storage rooms and statistical data in academic papers. Yet their collective story illuminates one of history's darkest practices: the systematic murder of women who had committed no crime except serving a tyrant's pleasure. They entered his palace as symbols of beauty and conquest. They died as reminders of absolute power's ultimate corruption. The irony is inescapable. Qin Shi Huang unified China, standardized currency and writing systems, built roads and walls that lasted millennia. His administrative innovations influenced Chinese government for over 2,000 years. Yet his personal relationships were so poisoned by paranoia and cruelty that he couldn't trust even his intimate companions to outlive him. Recent excavations have revealed one final, chilling detail. Some of the concubine burial pits show evidence of being reopened and resealed multiple times. This suggests that not all victims died simultaneously. Some may have been buried alive, then the pits were checked periodically to ensure no one had survived. The slow suffocation of women trapped in underground chambers adds another layer of horror to an already nightmarish story. The first emperor's legacy includes magnificent achievements and monumental crimes. His terracotta armies march through eternity, but they share the same archaeological site with mass graves of murdered women. Visitors come to admire ancient China's greatest artistic achievement while walking over the bones of its most forgotten victims. In 2016, Dr. Albert Lin's thermal imaging discovered 2 roads leading from the mausoleum site, one heading northwest toward the Silk Road trade routes, another pointing south toward the Yangtze River Valley. These roads were built for the emperor's earthly travels, but they also carried carriages full of terrified women who would never return home. The imperial bedroom itself reveals the calculated nature of these encounters. Archaeologists have reconstructed the layout from foundation stones found within the mausoleum complex. The emperor's chamber measured exactly 27 by 18 meters larger than most peasant houses. Silk hangings divided the space into sections. Sleeping area. bathing pools fed by underground springs, incense burners that filled the air with sandalwood and jasmine. But the room's most telling feature was its security. Hidden panels in the walls concealed armed guards. Secret passages allowed quick escape routes. Every piece of furniture was anchored to prevent use as weapons. Even the sleeping platform was designed with restraint points, silk cords disguised as decorative elements that could bind struggling victims if necessary. The concubines learned to read the emperor's moods through subtle signs. Red silk robes meant he was celebrating military victories. These nights often ended in violence against women from newly conquered territories. Blue robes indicated philosophical contemplation. He might spend hours discussing poetry before dismissing the woman without physical contact. Black robes were the most feared. They signaled his darkest impulses, when concubines might not return to their chambers at all. Palace records, discovered in clay tablet fragments during 2012 excavations, reveal the systematic nature of the selection process. Each woman received a numerical designation based on her ranking. Heaven grade. Concubines came from royal families of defeated kingdoms. Earth grade represented daughters of wealthy merchants and officials. Human grade included peasant girls chosen for exceptional beauty. The emperor's psychological profile emerges from these bureaucratic details. He required variety rotating between different ethnicities, ages, and social backgrounds on a precise schedule. Monday nights for women from the northern territories, Wednesdays for southern beauties. Fridays reserved for the youngest selections, girls barely past their 13th birthdays. Court physicians maintained detailed medical records for each concubine. Monthly examinations checked for pregnancy, disease, signs of aging or weight gain. Women who failed these inspections faced immediate reassignment, palace euphemism for execution. The medical scrolls, translated from ancient Chinese in 2017, reveal that over 60% of concubines never lived to see their 20th birthdays. The emperor's paranoia extended to elaborate testing rituals. New concubines underwent loyalty examinations that resembled torture more than seduction. They were drugged with mild poisons to test their pain tolerance, subjected to fake execution ceremonies to observe their reactions under extreme stress, forced to demonstrate their willingness to die for imperial pleasure by drinking increasingly concentrated doses of mercury-laced wine. Those who passed became inner circle concubines with access to the emperor's private quarters. Those who failed joined the outer palace, where they served as servants, entertainers, or practice subjects for the emperor's more sadistic experiments. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of training chambers where young women were taught to endure pain without screaming preparation for nights when the emperor's desires turned violent. The hierarchical system created deadly competition. Heaven grade. Concubines received silk robes, private chambers, personal servants. Human grade. Women shared dormitory-style quarters and ate simple rice meals, but rank could change instantly based on the emperor's whims. A single night of exceptional service might elevate a peasant girl above a former princess. Conversely, one perceived slight could send a high-ranking concubine to the execution grounds. Intelligence networks operated throughout the inner palace. Eunuch servants reported on conversations between concubines. Kitchen staff monitored eating habits for signs of pregnancy or illness. Even chambermaids were trained to recognize escape attempts or suicide preparations. The emperor demanded complete surveillance of his women. Their bodies belonged to him, but their minds remained dangerous territories requiring constant monitoring. The most chilling discovery from the excavations was a series of underground chambers directly beneath the concubine quarters. These discipline rooms contained shackles, whips, branding irons, and other torture devices. Bone analysis from remains found in these chambers shows evidence of systematic abuse. Broken ribs that healed poorly, fractured skulls, burn marks on arm and leg bones. Some women developed survival strategies. They formed secret alliances, sharing information about the emperor's preferences and warning each other about dangerous periods. They created coded language systems references to weather or seasonal changes that actually conveyed life or death intelligence about imperial moods and upcoming selections. The pregnancy lottery represented both hope and terror. Bearing the emperor's son guaranteed elevation in status, better food, protection from random violence, but pregnancy also meant 9 months of vulnerability. Rival concubines might poison expectant mothers or arrange accidents to eliminate potential heirs. Court records show that only 30% of imperial pregnancies resulted in live births, suggesting widespread infanticide and maternal murder. Successful mothers faced new horrors. The emperor viewed his children as potential threats, requiring constant surveillance. Concubines who bore sons were separated from their children within days of birth. The boys were raised by eunuch tutors in isolated palace sections. Mothers who attempted unauthorized contact with their sons faced immediate execution for plotting against imperial security. The emperor's sexual practices, documented in medical scrolls, reveal systematic brutality. Court physicians recorded injuries consistent with rape, strangulation, and deliberate mutilation. Some concubines required surgical repair after imperial visits. Others never recovered from internal injuries and died slowly from infection and blood loss. But the psychological damage was equally severe. Women who survived multiple encounters with the emperor showed symptoms that modern psychologists would recognize as severe trauma inability to speak for days or weeks, complete withdrawal from social contact, self-mutilation, and repeated suicide attempts. Palace records describe ghost women who wandered the corridors at night, unable to sleep, haunted by memories of imperial violence. The emperor's mother, Lady Zhao, serves as a cautionary tale about women who gained too much influence. Historical records show she conducted numerous affairs during the emperor's youth, eventually taking the merchant Lu Buwei as her lover and possibly plotting against her son's rule. The emperor's response was swift and brutal. He had his mother's lover executed, then placed her under permanent house arrest until her death. This matricidal paranoia shaped every subsequent relationship with women. The emperor viewed female sexuality as inherently treacherous, female intelligence as fundamentally dangerous. His concubines weren't companions or even breeding stock. They were potential assassins requiring constant vigilance and preemptive violence. The ritual preparations for imperial nights became increasingly elaborate over time. Concubines underwent hours of cosmetic enhancement, white lead powder to lighten skin, kohl to darken eyes, rouge made from crushed cinnabar to redden lips. Their hair was arranged in specific styles that indicated their ranking and the emperor's intentions. Simple braids meant brief encounters. Complex arrangements with jade ornaments suggested longer sessions with higher chances of violence. The women learned to interpret these preparations as death sentences. Certain cosmetic combinations were reserved for concubines who would not return to their quarters. The most ominous sign was the application of special perfumes made from rare orchids. These scents were designed to mask the smell of fear and blood during the emperor's most violent episodes. Archaeological evidence confirms the scale of this systematic abuse. The concubine burial pits contain not just bones, but fragments of clothing, jewelry, and personal items that tell individual stories. A jade comb broken in half suggests struggle during execution. Silk fragments torn and stained with what chemical analysis confirms is human blood. Gold earrings found separated from skulls indicate that ears were severed before or after death. The emperor's final years brought escalating paranoia and violence. Court records from 211 to 210 BCE describe nightly executions as the emperor's mercury poisoning progressed. Hallucinations made him see assassins in every shadow, poison in every meal, treachery in every glance. Concubines bore the brunt of these delusions, tortured and killed for imaginary crimes or suspected disloyalty. When death finally came for the emperor during his eastern tour, the palace machinery of murder was already well established. The second emperor's mass execution wasn't an aberration. It was the logical conclusion of a system designed to treat women as expendable objects. The only difference was scale. Instead of killing 1 or 2 concubines per night, the new regime eliminated hundreds in a single coordinated operation. The concubines of Qin Shi Huang feared their first nights because they understood the ultimate truth about absolute power. It recognizes no limits, acknowledges no mercy, and sees human lives as expendable resources. Their beauty brought them to the emperor's attention. Their powerlessness ensured their destruction. But the archaeological record reveals that some women refused to accept their fate quietly. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of resistance-hidden weapons, escape tunnels, even what appears to be a coordinated rebellion attempt in 211 BCE. Burn marks on palace walls suggest fires were set deliberately. Scattered human remains, found outside the official burial pits, indicate that some concubines died fighting rather than submit to execution. The emperor's death mask, recently discovered in a sealed chamber, bears scratches consistent with fingernails, evidence that even in death, he couldn't escape the women he had tormented. Whether these marks came from grieving concubines paying final respects or from vengeful spirits attacking his corpse remains unknown. But the physical evidence suggests that the relationship between the emperor and his women remained violent even beyond the grave. DNA analysis has revealed the global scope of the emperor's collection. Genetic markers show women from as far away as Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and possibly even the Mediterranean regions reached through early Silk Road contacts. The emperor's concubine quarters represented a catalog of conquered peoples, their daughters taken as living trophies of imperial expansion. The facial reconstructions completed in 2018 show faces from across the known world Mongolian features from the northern steppes. Vietnamese characteristics from southern conquests, Persian influences from western trade routes. Each face represents not just an individual tragedy, but the destruction of entire family lines and cultural traditions. Today, the mausoleum continues yielding its secrets. Ground-penetrating radar has identified over 200 additional burial chambers that remain unexcavated. Each one potentially contains evidence of more victims, more stories of women who entered the emperor's palace seeking fortune and found only death. The archaeological evidence proves it. The historical records document it. The bones scattered across 60 square kilometers of excavation sites don't lie. In the end, the concubines' fears were entirely justified. Their first nights in the imperial palace marked the beginning of a nightmare that would end only with their deaths, whether individually through imperial violence or collectively through mass execution at their master's funeral. The emperor sought immortality but achieved only infamy. His women sought security but found only terror. Both emperor and concubines are now reduced to bones and artifacts, but the evidence of their relationship remains preserved in the archaeological record, a permanent testament to what happens when absolute power meets absolute powerlessness.